History, it is often said, does not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. To fully understand the context of Nigeria's 1983 expulsion, one must rewind the clock by 14 years, to a time when the economic fortunes of the two nations were completely reversed. In 1969 it was Ghana that was facing economic strain, and it was Nigeria that was seen as the home of the aliens who were supposedly taking jobs from Ghanaians. Under the government of Prime Minister Kofi Busia, Ghana passed the Aliens Compliance Order. This policy mandated that all foreigners without the proper residency and work permits, a vast number of whom were Nigerian traders and laborers, had to leave the country within 2 weeks. It was a shocking move that predated Nigeria's infamous order. The parallels between the 1969 and 1983 events are hauntingly similar, revealing a cyclical pattern of xenophobia driven by economic anxiety. Just as Nigeria would later do, Ghana's leaders in 1969 sought a convenient scapegoat for the country's rising unemployment and economic struggles. The Nigerian community, which had a long and established history in Ghana, particularly in trade and cocoa farming, became the primary target. The order was sudden and ruthlessly implemented, creating panic and chaos. Hundreds of thousands of Nigerians, many of whom had been born in Ghana and knew no other home, were forced to abandon their businesses, properties and livelihoods, embarking on a painful exodus back to a country some barely knew. The human cost of Ghana's 1969 order was immense, creating a deep well of bitterness among the affected Nigerians. Families were uprooted, fortunes were lost overnight, and the sense of betrayal was palpable. These Nigerians had contributed significantly to the Ghanaian economy for generations, yet they were cast out with little notice and even less compassion. The journey back to Nigeria was arduous and filled with hardship, mirroring the future suffering of Ghanaians in 1983. This earlier expulsion planted the seeds of resentment that would lie dormant for years, creating a historical precedent for using mass expulsion as a tool of national policy in West Africa, a dark chapter that Nigeria seemed to have learned from all too well. Therefore, when Nigeria issued the Ghana Must-Go order in 1983, many older Nigerians did not see it as an unprovoked act of aggression. For them, it was simply payback, a long overdue settling of scores for the humiliation they had endured in 1969. This context does not excuse the brutality of Nigeria's actions, but it does complicate the narrative, revealing a tragic cycle of tit-for-tat retaliation. The pain inflicted by Ghana in 1969 was remembered and ultimately reciprocated, ensuring that the wounds between the two nations would not heal, but would instead be torn open again, deeper and more painfully than ever before, locking them in a destructive dance of mutual animosity. The memory of the 1983 expulsion lingered in Ghana like a persistent ghost, shaping attitudes for a generation. The trauma endured by the returnees became a part of the national story, a cautionary tale whispered from parent to child. So when Nigeria's economy faltered again in the subsequent decades, and its own citizens began migrating in search of opportunities, they often found a Ghana that was far from welcoming. The shoe was now on the other foot. As Nigerians moved to Ghana for education, to start businesses, or to engage in trade, they frequently encountered a wall of suspicion and resentment, a direct consequence of the historical wound that Nigeria had inflicted years earlier. This simmering animosity often boiled over into open hostility. In the years following the expulsion, reports of xenophobic attacks against Nigerians in Ghana became increasingly common. Nigerian traders in particular became a focal point of this resentment. They were often accused of unfair business practices, of driving local Ghanaians out of the market, and of operating without the proper licenses. These accusations, fueled by a mixture of economic competition and historical bitterness, sometimes led to organized campaigns to shut down Nigerian-owned shops, mass arrests by immigration officials, and violent clashes in marketplaces. The cycle of blame and persecution that Nigeria had perfected in 1983 was now being mirrored in Ghana. The Ghanaian authorities, while officially promoting Pan-African unity, often seemed to turn a blind eye or were slow to intervene when tensions flared. This official inaction was perceived by many Nigerians as tacit approval of the harassment. The legacy of Ghana Must Go created a justification in the minds of some Ghanaians for this harsh treatment. It was seen as a form of delayed justice, a way of making Nigerians feel the same vulnerability and insecurity that Ghanaians had experienced in 1983. The once clear lines between victim and aggressor had become blurred, lost in a recurring cycle of retaliation where past grievances were used to justify present-day intolerance. This enduring legacy of bitterness has ensured that the relationship between the two nations remains fragile, susceptible to periodic crises. Every new incident of xenophobia reopens old wounds and reinforces negative stereotypes on both sides. The dream of West African integration, built on the free movement of people and goods, is repeatedly undermined by this unresolved historical pain. The story of Ghana Must Go is not just an event from the past, it is a living, breathing wound that continues to shape the present. It demonstrates how easily brotherhood can curdle into bitterness, creating a destructive cycle that harms both nations and stands as a tragic monument to their shared, yet divided history. In the immediate aftermath of the Ghana Must Go expulsion, the Nigerian government may have believed it had solved a political problem, but it had unknowingly inflicted a deep and lasting wound upon its own economy. The sudden removal of up to 2 million people created a massive labor vacuum that the country was ill-prepared to fill. The Ghanaians had not just been aliens, they had been skilled teachers, experienced artisans, and tireless farmhands who formed a critical part of the economic engine. In the construction sector, projects stalled as skilled masons, carpenters, and electricians vanished overnight. Schools across the country, particularly in rural areas, were left without teachers, disrupting the education of a generation of Nigerian children and forcing many institutions to close their doors indefinitely. The impact rippled through various sectors, revealing how deeply integrated the immigrant workforce had been. Many small and medium-sized Nigerian businesses that relied on the skills and reliability of Ghanaian workers found themselves struggling to operate. Productivity plummeted as employers scrambled to find replacements, who often lacked the same level of experience or training. The informal sector, a vibrant and essential part of Nigeria's economy, was also hit hard. The expulsion disrupted supply chains and market dynamics that had been established over years of coexistence. In chasing away the scapegoats, Nigeria had inadvertently chased away a significant portion of its own productive capacity, exacerbating the very economic crisis the expulsion was meant to alleviate. Beyond the immediate labor shortages, the mass expulsion dealt a severe blow to Nigeria's standing within the West African community and damaged the principles of regional integration. The move was a flagrant violation of the spirit, if not the letter, of the ECOWAS Protocol on the Free Movement of People, which Nigeria had championed. This act of blatant nationalism eroded trust among its neighbors and weakened the collective economic vision for the region. Trade relations soured, and the diplomatic fallout was considerable, isolating Nigeria and undermining its claim to leadership on the continent. The economic consequences were therefore not just internal, they were regional, slowing the progress of economic cooperation for years to come. Perhaps the most significant long-term economic consequence for Nigeria was the loss of trust. The expulsion sent a chilling message to foreign investors and other migrant communities. Nigeria was an unpredictable and potentially hostile environment where political whims could override economic stability. This damaged the country's reputation as a reliable destination for labor and capital, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty that would linger for decades. The short-sighted political gain of blaming foreigners came at the steep economic price of lost productivity, strained regional relationships, and a tarnished international image, proving that the act was not just a human tragedy, but a profound economic miscalculation.